Sage Rosenfels, Brent Blum. Heard and viewed exclusively across the world. Only on Iowa Everywhere.
Welcome to Iowa Everywhere. This is Sage Rosenfels from the Rosenblum podcast. Mr. Rosenblum, Mr. Brent Blum on the other side. You are in your home?
I am today. Yes.
Cyclone in the background. I am in another random place during
Where are
my
you
travels.
Where are you today, Sage?
Because this is Iowa Everywhere. And I'm one of those people that, yes, I'm from Iowa, but I seem to do travel everywhere. Today I'm in San Francisco.
Of course you are.
On my last day before traveling home, here for a sort of family reunion, 70th birthday party for my aunt. My brother's a teacher here. So random Rosenfels took over the city this weekend, including my son came up from Los Angeles, which is great. Yeah, had a nice time. Ready to get back to the Midwest. A little different there than here. But we'll get into some San Francisco things. We have some things to talk about today. A little bit of a list. We've got a viral tweet.
Yeah, you exploded the internet last week.
I think they say the kids say he broke the internet.
Broke the internet. Yes. Yeah, you're calling out your old teammate Brett Favre for stealing money.
Did I? I don't know. I just said I didn't say anything. I just said I hadn't stolen any money from the poorest people in my state. Which happens to be the poorest state in the country.
Let's get into it because you've had a couple of these viral moments since you retired from the NFL, and you've turned yourself. You are an influencer now. Just people realize this. We're honored to have you on the Iowa Everywhere podcast. So this is which I'm adding it to the stream right now, but I will read it for our podcast listeners as well. You tweeted literally last week about this time that since retirement, I have been lucky to avoid stealing millions of dollars from the poorest people in my state.
That's right. I feel fortunate that I didn't put myself in position because either I ran out of money and I ran out of ways to make money. And so like that was what I had to do to like just survive. Right. So I'm lucky enough that at least from an investment standpoint or spending standpoint, I'm not in that position. Okay.
But
or I'm just lucky enough not to be like super, super greedy.
So how does this? So this has struck me about. So this is in reference to Brett Favre, who got into it with a complicated scenario with the governor of Mississippi that they took money from like a welfare fund. And I don't want to get into the politics of this thing because clearly what Brett Favre did was kind of gross. And then wanted to use some of the funding to build a volleyball practice facility. Am I understanding this right? Doesn't Brett Favre have enough money that he could build Southern Miss a volleyball facility on his own, or has he really been that reckless with spending?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he wasn't a big spender. He had a nice ranch down there, but land's pretty cheap.
How does it? Is it just a power thing? Is it an ego thing that hey, I can get this done, and I'm going to steal from this fund? Because he had to know what he was doing.
I don't know. It might be. Either a sort of super cheap thing or he's just super cheap and doesn't, because here's the story. He promised to Southern Miss that he would build this facility, some of his own funds, raising other funds, but he made a pledge that $4 or $5 million,
right?
I think $5 million, and but they, rather than just ponying it up, like I went to Iowa State. Okay, if I made $140 million and I also could make $1 million doing these ads and millions of dollars doing these ads, and he's made
still doing it, yeah.
Right? So like backup quarterbacks, we make about 1/10 or 1/15 of the starters a lot of times, but you really get none of the like extra money,
right?
Endorsement money,
stuff.
You know what I mean? So there were so many ways for him to make more money in this world. Tony Romo was making $17 million. Brett Favre could have made 10 or 15 million if he was good at TV games or being involved in the sport. So I don't know if it's just cheap that he just didn't want to spend it himself. But for me, I went to Iowa State. If I would have made $140 million and my daughter was going to play volleyball at Iowa State, and they had a really crappy old volleyball court or whatever it was, and I want to be a part of this thing so she could, not only have great experience, but maybe get better recruits in, because there's going to be this volleyball complex they're going to play at. This is going to would have maybe the Favre name on it, the Rosenfeld's name, right? And I think it'd be pretty easy just to like write the check, at least a major part of the check, and then go find other people to say, hey, let's do this thing, right?
Right.
I mean, use his influence in so many ways. Go ask. I don't see why Favre couldn't go out and ask a whole bunch of boosters to pony up for this. I know that's Southern Miss. It's not.
Yeah, they don't.
Iowa State is, I think, probably a very wealthy university compared to like Southern Miss.
Absolutely.
I understand that, but he had the money. But there are people that had the money, and he has so much influence. You'd think his convincing of people really wouldn't be that hard, but instead he went the government route.
Yeah, it's just
the government route, and
bizarre.
Specifically went to various government officials and people with sway in that world, and really, really, it sounds like consistently went after them with phone calls and conversations or in-person conversations of trying to get them to take money, give money. I think his point is he didn't know where the money was coming from, supposedly.
Yeah.
That's his point. But he also said, will the media know where we got this money from? So you'd think that he knows, and that people had explained to him that, and I think even the governor told him, I think this is breaking federal law. And he also tried it with the football stadium.
Right. It's just bizarre.
I don't know how the world works down in Mississippi. I hear it works different down there. I hear it works different down in the South, and they're really proud of that. But that feels like happens in all the states. This sort of self-dealing by the richest of the rich from the poorest of the poor in one way or another. Because they're also the ones who decide who the politicians are many times. And so all this sort of power and influence just seems like it's turned to this major self-dealing at its grossest, and it's, of course, it's a famous person who you're like, why would you ever do that?
This thing goes.
Imagine trying to pressure like the governor of Iowa into like, hey, like I said I was going to build this thing. Can you help me out from the Iowa, welfare fund?
The teachers fund.
All of it. Yeah. Anything, taking funds from anything, even taking funds from like the public recs department. You know what I mean? No, like this is my project, and I would, get the $5 million or what. I just can't fathom. I just can't fathom it.
So you followed that tweet up with another follow-up that was brilliant. You said, of course, this is partially because I had already stolen millions from the richest people in the country. They'll be the owner. So what is it like? So just so you know,
what's that like? So I stole that from someone because someone paid a ticket. All the initial comments of like the thousands of comments or whatever on the first one, I was realizing a couple of people said, you stole millions of dollars from the NFL, like you sucked as a quarterback. You get these things, and it's those then sometimes become jokes too. Like when it's a response to one of the responses, they sort of give it to you, then they get to use it for yourself or whatever.
That's part of the game.
I thought I put together pretty well because I did steal from the billionaires, which is more fun, I guess. Not quite as greedy, taken from those men. So anyway,
so that thing had like over 100,000 likes. What's it? You've had a couple of these now hit where do you turn your phone off? I'm sure you're getting texts from people you know, like, "Hey, Sage, good job on Twitter." I mean, what's that situation like?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I got a half dozen random texts or people will just send me things, like a DM or whatever, but I don't really respond to it. But I got a TMZ text from a TMZ live something. I'm not going to do that.
Peter King called you, right?
It's not where I'm trying to take this thing, and some feud between like the backup quarterback, the Brett Favre, and Brett Favre.
Go for it, man.
In the state of Mississippi.
Go for it.
I got nothing else to do.
Yeah. What are you going to do? You're at 70th birthday parties in San Francisco. Like, get a feud going with Favre.
Yeah. This is what the world wants to see.
I think I'd like your chances there.
So I got a message from Peter King, which is interesting. And this probably of all the things for me, at least, because then every once in a while, like a national, someone you respect, wants to talk to you about it. And Peter, when I retired from the NFL, he and I met for coffee in New York, and I'd only met him through maybe a couple times where I had a couple great games, and he had called me. That's sort of what he does, calls the story of the day or whatever. And he and I had coffee because I was like, what am I going to do after football? It was actually in New York. I was visiting that same aunt. And we started talking about various things, and he asked me these questions. Of course, I was asking about Favre. I said, I told him some stories, and there was just one story about that NFC Championship game where Favre sat next to me after he threw the interception. He said I joked, and that told him he was the greatest football player I'd ever seen. And Peter goes, "Oh, man, that's a great story." And I said, well, I wrote something after that game because I couldn't sleep for like 3 days. And my mom's like, just start writing. Get it out. You got to get it out of your mind from spinning. So I wrote this, thing. I don't know how many words it was, 10,000 words or now probably 5,000 words or something. And I don't know, it took me a couple months. My brother, who's a teacher, helped me edit it like a little more professional and organize it. Sent it to him, ended up writing in Sports Illustrated.
Remember that?
It was my first ever a piece about Brett Favre, the football player. And Brett Favre, the man in the locker room, his humor, his ability to get along with everybody and be jovial. And
so he was a good guy. I mean, I know you got after him on Twitter last week, but you seem to appreciate Brett Favre.
Yeah, I mean, playing with him. And that's what, so Peter and I talked about this. People were telling him, like, you knew this guy. Did you think this guy would do that? And Peter goes, I didn't know Brett. I don't know Brett Favre. I mean, I interviewed him 100 times. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about football. We're talking about games and plays and but as who he really was, I don't know. Right. That's how we all sort of are in that sort of world. In some ways, you sort of become who you are after you leave football, to be honest with you. Sure. In my opinion, because that's where you sort of settle in and find yourself. Football is like this crazy circus going on until it's over. Right. So you sort of become who you are after football. But he did tell a great story to me when we were talking on the phone about Brett. They had a special needs worker at the Packers. He worked in the equipment room or something. And he had a birthday party. And Brett went for 3 hours. And, no coaches, players showed up, though people were invited. But he went and talked for people for 2 or 3 hours, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, that doesn't surprise me at all. That doesn't surprise me at all. And said, everyone liked him in that locker room. He didn't make, practice squad guy walk up to him and say, hey, could I get an autograph? Or, hate to do this. And he signed everybody's stuff. And so I that's why I wouldn't have written the article if I didn't believe that. Sure. Like there was guys I played with who were probably going to be Hall of Famers. There's a guy or two I played with that's in the Hall of Fame now. I'm like, he was an asshole. Like he was.
Do you want to name names, Sage? Or
no, I don't.
Do you want to end up on Twitter some more?
I'm sure I was an asshole. I mean, it's an intense situation.
Absolutely.
You don't like everybody, and so you do your best out there. But he was not that. There were interesting, weird things, oddities, but very inclusive. Like quarterbacking is this, in my opinion, is this like inclusive. Inclusive is like magnetic. You're bringing people in, and some people have this like inclusiveness sort of about them, of bringing people in and then making them like the best version of themselves. All right. You're not going to make people the best version of themselves if you're this like cold, sort of guy with no like magnetic behavior, but it has to be real and authentic. And for Favre, sort of Midwesterner / Southerner, it's a very friendly Midwestern. It's not East Coast and West Coast. It's very down home, down earth. And he grew up with that. And but this whole thing is just bizarre to me. So this way, like, it doesn't fit, but in some ways it sort of does, because it is sort of like in small little towns in America. Like, this is sometimes, I guess, this is how politics
stuff gets done. Right.
This is how stuff gets done. This is how, handshake deals, as they say, at like the smallest places. It's not just like New York City or Las Vegas or these handshake, but this is sort of how America works. I had someone to explain that to me one time. Driving out to Nebraska, out to this, I was repainting my house, and I was like looking for a different color, and my buddy's like drives me out to this lake out in half an hour from where I live. We're driving around looking for all these houses that have like some blues in them, sort of like a Connecticut sort of style, blue home, I guess, whatever, on the water. And we're in the middle of nowhere. We're on this brand new road for like 5 miles. And he's like, do you know how the world works in or something? We're talking about politics or something. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, do you think that there's like a really good reason the county built this beautiful new road out to 20 homes out here on this small lake? It's because people out there paid the right people to make sure this road needs to be brand new. That's how it works. Like, that's how the world sort of works, and at least in the United States, from a business, we all sort of either don't realize it or don't want to
even think about it, right?
But whoever gets those government contracts in all the various ways, the biggest corporation in America, right? Who gets to seem to have an unlimited budget, and where it all goes. And this was going to, as a federal dollars going to states for their poverty, federal dollars. So really this is all of us, all of our money going to various states, and Mississippi having the 20% of the population in poverty in Mississippi, the poorest of the poor, and one of the lowest education, health, all the quality of life. It's a very, very hard place to grow up. And so federally, we send dollars to Mississippi, and that's where this money came from, because there's not good oversight between federal dollars down to the states. You expect the states to do the right things with them. And this is what happened.
What can happen.
Yeah. $77 million, by the way, is the total investigation. It sounds like $77 million, including, did you know this one? Ted DiBiase, the $1 million man. The $1 million man.
It was a blast.
The $1 million man is a pastor or a preacher, I'm not sure, in Mississippi. He is not the $1 million. Well, he is the $1 million man. He's just doing it a different way. But I believe his son received a whole bunch of funds to give like motivational speeches. All right. Hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. Favre, by the way, also received $1.1 million to give speeches. I guess he never gave, or maybe he gave one of the speeches. And he ended up giving the money back. Again, like $1.1 million. Why does Brett Favre have to get paid? I made $140 million.
I've always wondered about.
In Iowa want me to give some speeches. I'll give them for free. Give them for free to get people to give money or whatever it might be. Why do you got to get paid to do the right thing in your state? I give free speeches all the time. For me, one of the best things about it is it's like therapy to get in front of people and talk about things that I witnessed in my football career. So the whole thing is super bizarre as we continue to go. But yeah, the $1 million man. Anyway, he gave I'm sorry, he gave the 1 point. He got the 1.1 million. Gave the money back, and then they're suing him because he wouldn't give. They want the interest too. They're like, listen, you had $1.1 million for a couple of years,
so now we
want the interest, and he won't pay the interest back. I believe I read that, and so yeah, I don't know. What do you think about it?
I just keep coming back to why does he need to get mixed up with that in the first place? If you made the pledge, then pay the pledge, right? Like I worked for the Iowa State Foundation. Like that's part of it. Like if you're going to make the commitment, then pay your commitment. I don't know why you had to get the government involved. And how did he not think this was going to come up in some regard? Like it just seemed like it was a dumb idea, and maybe he thought he could get away with it, and so that's why he did it. So I don't know. The whole thing was just odd to me. And then why would if you're the governor, I would just tell Brett. I mean, what leverage does Brett Favre have on the governor of Mississippi anymore? I mean, it's not like Brett Favre's going to get him elected. I don't know. It's just I'd rather complain about officials than talk about Brett Favre's misuse of public funding.
Well, we would. So
other corruption. It's the corruption I want to talk about. Sage Rosenfeld. Is there corruption? Is there corruption in officiating?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
There is like one of those untold. There's the ESPN or Netflix.
Yeah, the Tim Donahue one. That was actually well done.
I'm sure you saw it.
I did.
Those are all well done because they just talk about sports in a deeper way of events that we all heard about, and a little Sports Center clip sometimes, or a season or something. So those are great, by the way.
I did want to ask you about officiating in general and what it's like as a player, but anything else on Sage Rosenfeld's mind before we dig into the sports scene? I know you're in San Francisco, you're in Philly. By the way, George, how great is George Niang?
Man, I made a video for that. I have no technology skills. I end up just going to the photo booth and videotaping our interview. And it didn't work, surprisingly. For an hour, photo booth didn't record that.
Didn't record that long, yeah.
But I got the audio decently. He had his air conditioner unit wasn't working very well. It seemed like it was just running the whole time. And it was still sort of warm in there. He lives in a sweet place. George is doing great. What a great guy. I feel like every time I hang out with him, I don't know. There's just some similarities there. When I first started talking to him, I was like, listen, if you can just make it, get good at a couple skills, get good at shooting. You already got sort of the multi thing, but man, really, really dial in. And you'll get to like year 4, year 5, and all of a sudden you're like a veteran, and you don't even have to like work that hard because you just what's going to happen next. Your body is in a more comfortable, and I think that's where he's getting to in his career. So the question is, how long does that go for, and how long can he play for? And, but he's got this sort of all around game, man. What a fun player to watch. AJ. So I'm in Philadelphia, and AJ Feely, who I played with also, he lives there. He came out for some drinks one night, and I said, did a podcast with George Niang today, and et cetera, et cetera. And he was like, oh man, I love his game. He's like the guy at the YMCA.
He's never going to shake that, but it's true.
And it's true. And I said, he has since college, he's had great 50-year-old man game. And it really is. It's this 50-year-old, which is sort of like what my game would be, of like just sort of slow moving, little this, little that, can handle the ball, good passer, not selfish, little jump hook inside, can sort of body up bigger men. He really does have this multi-dimensional, like the Swiss Army knife. I mean, if you want to give him a better nickname, it'd be like the Swiss Army knife or something like that.
Well, and so there's two things that I think I want to get your opinion on this. One, he's a great shooter, and if he's going to shoot over 40%, somebody will have space for George, because that's what you need to do at that league anymore, especially if you're a role player. But two, everybody loves the guy. And so there's value, right? I've never been in a football locker room. I've seen it from the media side. But guys that can get along with everybody, to your point earlier about Favre got along with pretty much everybody, and it's probably the reason why he stuck around for so long is he got everybody to play well. People love playing with George. And he's a fun guy. He's not going to hurt you in the media. He's not going to be a nuisance. He's not going to be Kyrie Irving, making a bunch of news off the scene. Even though he's not the most talented guy, he's a net win in the locker room, which it always surprises me how much that matters at the professional level, but also in college. Like if your team doesn't get along, I've been around some Iowa State teams that don't get along, and it can really sour on the playing field as well.
I think basketball, more than any other sport, the personality of the human being comes out as like the player. I do. I think I had a conversation with a politician about this one time. J.D. Scholten, you know, he ran for
up in Northwest
Iowa, and he and I played basketball together. And I didn't even really need to have like a conversation with him to know like I liked his basketball style. He was unselfish, smart. He could pass. He could shoot the three. He could be inside. Just sort of a multi. It's like he and I were very similar type players on two sides of the state. You know, he's 6'4", probably he's a tall guy. So we had that sort of, you know, all the skills, not great, not a great athlete, right? But the unselfishness when you're playing with guys, or when they call it straight, or just their fundamentals are really good, which means they have like a detail for like respecting the rules, you know what I mean, of basketball and stuff. And anyways, basketball is a sport that you can sort of tell what you know, sort of type of person is, you know, sometimes. And I think George is like unselfishness means that he doesn't have the ego. He's humble. Like there's various things he does a little of everything. You know, he'll do the dirty work. He's paying attention. So sometimes other guys maybe aren't. Like he's just very aware of what's going on, and he's also just super likable. He just really is a likable guy. And he talked about his education, like he got a scholarship to a private school, and he learned how to talk to adults. He learned how to be an adult, and how that really probably has an effect on his overall success. And just think about that, right? If he wouldn't have had that opportunity, he wouldn't be maybe as likable or as trustworthy. And I shouldn't say the word trustworthy, dependable, I guess.
For sure.
Is right. Because as an athlete, you want to be dependable to your teammates. And when you have to sort of become an adult when you're a freshman in high school, like he did at this private school, boarding school, that must be just game changing from a maturity standpoint for an athlete like that.
So that's interesting. So when you were younger, some of the guys that were lower on the coaching totem pole are now NFL head coaches. Yeah. And I think this speaks to this conversation. You just knowing you, Sage, you treat everybody about the same. I mean, you will talk to anybody clearly, and often for hours at a time, as the audience realizes that you can just keep talking. You're the Bill Walton of veteran NFL quarterbacks, which I think is perfect.
If you can get Bill Walton on here,
I'm working on it. Yeah. But when you treat people that way, so I want reference to the NFL now. Mike McDaniel's now the head coach of the Dolphins. You knew him when he was with the Redskins, or I mean, tell the background there. And I know you're not surprised that he's having success with the Dolphins because he treated people the right way, and people seem to like the guy, even though he wasn't an NFL player.
Correct. He 2006, the Texans were the worst team in the NFL. 2005, they were 2-14. 2006, Kubiak gets the job. I'm a free agent. I go to Houston. They offered me the most money, and I'd heard Kubiak was a good coach, and so
how much money?
Really want to know this?
I'll look it up on ProFootballReference.com if you really want me to.
$2 million signing bonus.
Okay,
so it was the first time I ever got paid. The first time I got paid in the M's. Yeah. But it was a 4-year contract. Looking back, I probably should have signed like a 3-year deal or something.
Yeah.
But either way, I took it. It was like from Miami to Houston. It was like, here we go. You know, changing in my swimming trunks for my cowboy boots. You know,
right.
I'd never really spent any time in Houston before, and so we get there. Troy Calhoun, who's the Air Force head coach, ever since 2006 or 2007, he got that job, and hired, by the way, Matt McGettigan, who was Iowa State's longtime strength and conditioning coach,
still there.
Based off of my recommendation, because I had talked about him in a meeting one time. That literally happened, I believe. So, so we get there. He's the offensive coordinator, and he is just basically whatever Kubiak tells him to do, he'll do it exactly the way Gary Kubiak tells him what to do. Because really, Gary's the offensive coordinator, in play caller and all those things. Kyle Shanahan is the receivers coach. Mike Sherman, the old Packers head coach, was our offensive line coach, assistant head coach. John Benton was also really the O-line coach, and he has been sort of Kyle's O-line coach ever since, and most of the stops Kyle's been to. So Kyle moves from there to quarterbacks coach the next year, to coordinator my third year there, to then, another coordinator, goes with his dad to
Washington.
Quality control wise on that staff, Robert Saleh, defensive quality control, head coach of the Jets now. Mike McDaniel, who was a ball boy with the Denver Broncos, into playing at Yale, to now a quality control, lowest coach in the totem pole, doing really a lot of computer work. All right, and he was very good at computers. He had more computer skills than most quality control guys, and a year or maybe 2 years later, maybe it was 08, Matt LaFleur was another quality control guy, also went to Washington and followed Kyle around. His brother, Mike LaFleur, who hopped on this train at some point ago, is the offensive coordinator with the Jets under Robert Saleh. Right. I mean, this sort of web is just continue to grow and grow and grow. But Mike McDaniel was, he was on that staff, and he was really likable. He didn't fit the, of course, prototypical.
He doesn't look like a coach. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for forever, football coaching has been very masculine, very intimidating. Bill Parcells. And,
like the Lions coach, Dan Campbell.
Yeah. Great speaker.
Yeah.
But really, Dan Campbell's way more positive than what those guys used to be back in the old days, like sort of miserable men, just grumpy and pissed off. And you guys suck. And they're just going out there with literally thin plastic helmets, just beating the crap out of each other day in and day out in the mud. And, but it was a different time and era back then, wasn't it? People have built a little differently. But McDaniel and really Kyle, because Kyle's sort of scrawny himself. I don't know. He's probably 6'1", 6'1" or 6'2".
Sure.
But I don't know, probably played college football at 165 pounds at Texas. Maybe he probably got up to 180 or something. But he's pretty skinny. I mean, McDaniel is small too, but what it became was these guys sort of mastered the art of designing play actions and bootlegs based off of that outside zone scheme. And they just got so good at it. In 2007, when we called a bootleg, we averaged 11 yards in it every time we called the play. If we had completed it, we averaged 19.5 or something like that. Just astronomical.
Right. So why wouldn't you do that all the time?
Why wouldn't you do that all the time? And some sort of run or outside zone a lot of times. Excuse me. But then the play actions had crazy numbers too. And because the play actions they designed, and this sort of went back to the Mike Shanahan style, the play actions were designed just like the runs. I know that sounds crazy, but you wouldn't believe how often teams are like, yeah, we're going to do this play action, but we have no run that's complementary to it. It's just sort of play action that looks like is a protection. But these coaches really no, we're going to, our first 3 or 4 steps it will be a running play that we just won't go downfield, but we will move double teams and force the defenses to play all the gaps. So if they don't play the gaps, if they don't step up and fill those gaps, right, we're just going to run the ball on them then because they're going to be late. And so causing really misdirection of the defense to have to move one way, and then the offense comes back another way. And the whole time they're not rushing the passer, which is really what all they want to do. And so it's wildly successful, and excuse me,
still is.
It still is. And now too is, having great success in this type of system.
Would you say we're 3 weeks into the NFL. Give me your top 5 NFL teams, because I've seen some power rankings. The Dolphins are in there. Clearly, they haven't lost yet. Are the Eagles legit? Are you in on Jalen Hurts? Like, what? I don't know. I don't know if I can completely buy them. The Packers have now responded. It was an ugly win, but they beat Tampa and Brady. Where do you go? I mean, the Vikings are 2-1. I don't think they're for real necessarily, but they're 2-1. I don't know. I think the NFL. Maybe I'm just getting old. It just seems like it is as even as it has ever been. Like week to week, like the Colts beat the Chiefs, and I know the Chiefs made some mistakes in that game, but I would never have thought that's a possibility. So all that said, Sage, who do you think's any good?
Well, I do think Miami's good, not great. I do think Buffalo is sort of the best team. I just think they didn't play well on Sunday. I think the Chiefs will be in there. I think Tampa is going to be one of the best teams because of their defense.
You're right.
Because of their defense. I think their defense is phenomenal. Their offense, I don't know.
The Rams, Eagles.
So I think the Eagles are the best team in football.
Really?
I do. We could go in this whole discussion about why. In my opinion, it's because of two things. And number one, they've got a starting quarterback who is a dual threat, who is a running back body, he's a big, strong running back body, and he's a good runner. But he is developing, and he's an accurate passer, and he's developing into a better and better quarterback as time goes on. And he's also, because I think of some of his training, he doesn't take a ton of chances. So he doesn't make a lot of, he's not just out there gunslinging. Sometimes he's a little conservative, and the guy will be open and he won't pull the trigger because he's a little unsure about it. But he does so many things well, and he's very hard for a defense to go against. Is he the best quarterback in the league? No. But what he is the best quarterback in the league at is having a low salary cap. And a small salary cap number has allowed them to go out and get Darius Slay Jr., has allowed them to go out and get A.J. Brown. And they have, and
the line's really good, it looks like to me.
Very good lines, very well coached. Listen, football at the end of the day, it's the game of the lines. It really is. And they are very well coached up front. Their defensive line, it feels like, has just been good forever. Really going back to like the Hugh Douglas days of the early 2000s.
There you go.
Yeah, they've had some really, really good defensive lines, and so and that's no different. Offensive line with Kelsey, they're very, very well. They have good athletes, and they have really good fundamentals up there. I like their running back. He runs hard. A couple of running backs that are pretty good. And Hurts has been this. So you have this like elevated roster. That's really the thing. There's a lot of teams, you pay your quarterback $45 million.
Didn't even think about that.
I mean, Jalen Hurts is making like, I don't know, $1.6 million is his cap number or something like that. So you just have literally $43 million more than another team that's paying $45 million a year to go out and get other players. And you have then truly an elevated roster, and you usually can't do it forever because at some point Jalen Hurts is going to want $45 million a year.
Yep.
And then it sort of becomes that question of how much do you pay him, and but your team's not going to be as good. And this is what happens every time it happens.
So the Ravens are fighting right now, aren't they, with Jackson? Is like he deserves to be paid, but if they do that, then they're going to lose some of their valuable assets on the other side.
That's right. I mean, that's what they're weighing. Every team is weighing, and mixed with replacement cost. Like, hey,
it's a business.
We don't do that. What are what's the possibilities out there? Do we draft somebody and start over? But I wrote an article about 8 years ago for a website. And it was when Kaepernick and Russell Wilson were having success as like rookie, second-year players, and it was like, what if GMs decide to go with this business model? We're just never going to pay somebody. We're never going to pay somebody, $35 million or $45 million or whatever. We're just going to let them go, and and or even trade him away and get a couple first-round draft picks, and then keep building that roster with cheap draft picks and cheap quarterbacks. We got to start over a quarterback, and of course, you got to find the right one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting right now, just looking at the odds. So to your point, the Bills are the favorites still. They're 4-1. The Chiefs are second at 7.5-1, and the Eagles are third at 8-1, with Green Bay at 4 at 9-1. So, yeah, I mean, I guess Vegas agrees with the eyes of Sage Rosenfeld. So kudos to you.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I watched almost no football this weekend, Iowa State or the NFL. That's the way it goes. I did see San Francisco though.
Rough. I mean, and what do they do? I mean, do you put Purdy in? I mean, Garoppolo is. I mean, he's got to be just mind effed at this point with what they've kind of toying around with him for a year and a half. But they can't. I mean, Lance is hurt now, but I don't think Purdy's ready. I mean, that's a great roster that is really limited right now by the quarterback.
Purdy might be almost the better option. What they want is a quarterback that can threaten the defense.
Sure.
And excuse me, with his legs. And Purdy can do that better than Garoppolo. I mean, they went out and got Trey Lance because they that's why Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts. Yep, it's Jalen Hurts model.
Right. So there is a model where it's if they're a running quarterback, but they can become a more and more accurate passer with time and get better at it. And I think a lot of these quarterbacks have, and I mean, Lamar Jackson can now throw it much better than he used to throw it like as a rookie. But they love having that threat with the legs, and obviously Garoppolo doesn't have that threat at all. He's got quick feet, but he can't run. And Purdy can run a little bit, as Iowa Staters know. So I don't think he's the better option. I think Brock has a lot to learn, and Jimmy's on a whole nother level probably of experience for game playing wise. I think if Brock Purdy had to go in for 49ers, they couldn't do a lot of things that Kyle Shanahan wanted to do. But I bet you Kyle would put him in position to be successful. I do know that. And, Brock played pretty dang well in the preseason, and which is pretty exciting for a young guy and a pretty complex offense. And so that would be something else. And his rookie year, Mr. Irrelevant goes out there. It would just sort of add to the lore and the legend of Brock Purdy.
And they still, to my point, that it's a great roster still, they still have the 8th best odds to win the Super Bowl. So, I mean, there's still belief in the Niners if they can figure out the quarterback. I almost think with what they have and as loaded as they are, you almost have to make a trade. I mean, if Garoppolo is going to be this bad, I think you have to look at trying to do something else anyway. So one thing I want to get, we're running out of time here, and I know you got to get on the road. Officiating. So I don't want to get into particulars of what happened in the Iowa State game. And I know you said you didn't watch all the specifics, but there were 3 what I would say atrocious calls all in the first half that all went against Iowa State.
The calls that I saw were was Anthony Johnson.
Yes, on the cut block.
From what I know, that's exactly. If I was teaching as a defensive backs coach, I would literally teach what he did.
Right.
Exactly that way. So there's this phrase called outside arm and leg free. You got to keep her outside arm and leg free. And that's because you're the last guy before the sidelines. And so you have to make sure that ball cuts back to the pursuit, your teammates that are coming. So forcing the ball to cut back so then somebody else can get him. But if you go inside and he bounces outside, there's no one there. And then he outruns everybody, right? And that's the problem. So when you have like a pulling guard or a tackle, an outside linebacker or a safety, or a corner, they are taught to run through that outside hip, which is exactly what he did. Not his knee, right through the hip to really his midsection, and caused that runner and really went through the offensive lineman.
And he made the tackle. It was a hell of a play.
And it was a heck of a play, and they called it like he cut the offensive lineman or something like that. And that was a terrible call. There was a shallow crossing route.
Yes.
Right.
Colby Reeder.
Route that Colby Reeder just sort of knocked the guy down as he was like 4 yards, right, or something.
Yeah,
like that.
And there's not even that's not even a rule in college. Like, and you got illegal contact in the NFL that doesn't exist in college. I mean, But so everybody saw it. I think they missed him, clearly. The targeting's another conversation. Hassel and Williams had a good conversation about it on Monday. I mean, they got to figure out a difference. I mean, you can't have all or nothing on this thing, in my opinion. I agree with that. But as a player, is it disheartening when you get stops like that, or even as a quarterback, hey, that guy interfered with my guy. That should continue, and now I'm pissed. The crowd's pissed. Everybody's pissed. What do you think? What are you thinking as a player at that point?
I mean, I think what you're taught and you're trained to is you just move on.
Just move on.
Yeah.
I can't move on.
Fans don't move on. The coaches, they don't move on because it's sort of their responsibility. Players, you can't do anything about it. So it's move on and let someone else handle it. There's a lot of football of like, that's not your responsibility. Your job is to just get ready for that.
Do your job. Yeah.
Do your job. Next play, next play, next play. The coaches will handle it. So it's really the head coach's job to do anything about it. Really, nobody else can. And but it is shot. So not, it must be hard to be an official. I've never been an official. It must be hard. I couldn't imagine having to make like these, calls on split second.
Oh, right. It's hard.
And the reason, and by the way, what I don't like about the targeting rule is that there's these split second decisions that are made that we're watching in slow motion. And to me, to throw somebody out of a football game on like the first attempt that's not like egregious, right? I mean, it's people are trying to stop each other. You lead with your head. Everybody does, He runs behind his shoulder pads means he puts his head down.
Right. It's a nice way to put it.
So to say that like you can call a penalty, you can call it a 15-yard penalty, or I think you just have various types. And the throw-out type has to be either like the second one of the game or something that's so sort of almost gross that like we don't need that in football, not these bang plays where a safety's coming up or someone's coming over and they're just trying to go down to meet them at their level. But the runner has his head. Of course, they're going to be going forward.
They're going to lower too, right?
So where are you supposed to just let them go? Is that what you're supposed to do? Let them get the extra 2 yards on the fall forward, right? But it's this game of inches, and every inch matters. And so you're trying to stop them and get them down as quickly as possible. And when they're leading with their head, it's hard not to get down there and even use a shoulder pad or a forearm and sometimes it's their head.
And they can throw a flag on that now too. It's not just your head anymore. It's any forcible contact. It's crazy. I would not want to be an official at that level. I mean, I encourage everybody to go, if you can, get on the sideline or even the first couple of rows for a game. These are large individuals moving very, very fast. Yeah. And it's such a violent game. Like, it's Sage, but you don't appreciate how violent it is until it's right next to you. And, like, you're on the sideline, you're legitimately scared. Like, please don't run towards my area because you can get serious damage done.
I have sometimes weird thoughts about when
everyone's just agreeing. I sometimes have weird thoughts. I think that's Sage Rosenfeld.
But I have weird thoughts about when they show or weird memories, I should say, of when they show like the behind the quarterback, the camera that's right behind the quarterback.
Yeah.
I remember handing the ball off to first it was Darren Davis, right? And then Ennis Haywood, and then into these NFL deals. And you sort of turn back around to like do your little play action, but then you sort of look at the line and just the noise of all of
car
it.
crashes.
But the noise of the physical violence that's going on, but to hear people with just all these noises that are made when people are smashing into each other. Like there's verbal noises going on too. Yeah. That aren't words. They're just strains,
just grunts.
Just grunts and sounds of strain and pain. Oh man. But I turn around and look at like a running back go through the hole and just boom, 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 get knocked down. It's like, oh God.
Let me stand back here and throw the ball.
Yeah. So speaking of that, can I say this?
Yes.
One thing I have with the Trey Lance injury. since we're back
Yeah.
to 4 years. The Trey Lance injury. I hate it. And I respect Kyle Shanahan as a coach, but I hate it when they do that sort of fake the jet sweep or whatever it is, outside run, and then the quarterback has some sort of like something going on back. Not when they zone read it and run around and it's like them or the corner, or they can see a linebacker chasing them and they can sort of slide down and whatever, protect themselves. But that one where they run up right up the middle. And I always feel like that's a great way to get your quarterback hurt. I understand it works and it's really hard on defense, but it's a great way. Run your quarterback up the middle of a football field, I think, is an extremely dangerous, unless he has a special. I mean, I wouldn't run Lamar Jackson on those types of plays. I would just you find ways that are a little bit more protective of, if you're in high school and you have a couple quarterbacks and this is what you guys do and your quarterback's a great runner and that it's a different game. But in the pro game, I think you run your quarterback up the middle like that.
Just asking for trouble.
You're asking for it. Quarterback draws are different. You're on the 5-yard line and they're playing zone coverage and you go back and you have everyone run quick outs and they all sort of spread and it's you or a safety and you have a chance to get in. I think that's a totally different style of running than these sort of jet sweeps where people are going sideways and you're coming back in and you're just going to get sandwiched and quarterbacks aren't designed generally to do that. You're 6'3" and not as big. Running backs are different, and those guys don't last very long. So I just think it's just really not worth the reward is not worth the risk.
Interesting.
And it drives me nuts in college football, and it drives me nuts in pro football. I just feel like there's easier yards to be had out there than risking your quarterback. And usually teams go downhill when their starter goes out.
So Sage was in Philly last week. You're in San Francisco now. What's on the Rosenfels docket for the travel plans?
Well, I'm not going to Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, the Hurricanes.
The hurricane.
Yeah, have you lived in a hurricane?
When I played for the Dolphins for 4 years, I think we would have 1 to 2 come through. It seemed like every year. I have stories of practice facility with no power, but they have this like Generac generator that's keeping. So
you
the
still
whole
practice?
They'd have gasoline there for you to fill up your car with gasoline to make sure you made it back for practice the next day. No electricity at my house. I'm barbecuing with Kevin Carter, the old Florida Gators defensive lineman. We're CBS Sports, and we're barbecuing because your stove, nothing worked on the inside of the house. We're just sitting out by the pool barbecuing, putting up metal shutters on your windows, unscrewing these things from your walls, which are all concrete, and putting these heavy duty like stainless steel shutters on.
Does the team help you, or are you on your own with that stuff?
You're
okay. I would have no idea what to do.
Yeah. They have 53 shutter teams out there.
I'd be calling Favre, help me out.
Yeah, but here's my favorite one. Here's my favorite one. We play a game in New Orleans, or I'm in Miami, and the team doesn't want to go. The team does not want to go to this game because we know when we come back, there's this hurricanes going on. We don't want to leave our families. And Junior Seau goes after practice, goes, Coach, as players, we've decided we're not going to go to this preseason game. We're going to stay home with our families, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And Dave Wanstead's like, all right, guys, and the team president comes out, and they because everyone's been having these conversations behind the scenes, I think.
Yeah.
And there's the guys we have been, the team president, and I think Dave says, we have been promised we'll be able to fly back either Miami or Fort Lauderdale. All right. After the game, there's enough time before the hurricane hits. We've been promised they're going to have the airport ready for us. Okay. Then we all just disperse. And it's like, so what are you doing? Are you going to go?
Are you going to go? No. What'd you do?
So about 2/3 of the team shows up. I'm going to go. I'm trying to make this team.
Yeah, I guess you're trying. You're not Junior Seau.
There was like some rookie guys like didn't show up, and I was like, what are these guys thinking? It's like
see ya.
Junior cannot show up.
Right.
Nothing happens. Yeah. So I played in this preseason game with, I had no tight end. So we had either 4 wides, or we'd go regular personnel and put an extra tackle at tight end and just run the ball and do like play actions with 2 receivers going out in routes. I mean, it was or 4 wides. That was something. So anyway, of course we don't fly back into Miami or Fort Lauderdale. We fly back into Tampa because that's the only airport open. which is about a 3.5-hour drive, where they put us on buses, and we drove across Alligator Alley in the middle of a hurricane, and I'm laying on the floor. I mean, this is 2 o'clock in the morning too, right? Or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just laying on the floor in the aisle. People are just passed out everywhere. And you can just feel the bus going back and forth, like just sort of just being pushed. And you just hear the howling winds. And yeah, that's
no fun. You made it. Fun. You're here. You didn't end up in Alligator Alley and got eaten by, Rocky the Gator.
No fun. So no, I'm in, that's it. I'm back in Omaha for a couple weeks. I will be down at the Iowa State-Texas game in about 3 weeks.
You can see Ricky?
I was thinking about trying to get Ricky on the podcast.
Let's get Ricky Williams on the podcast.
Yes. We can do. I should be able to. I'd like to think I could make that happen, but you never know.
You never know with Rick.
So there's that. ACL, Austin City Limits, is going at the same time. It's going to get a little music. Austin City Limits, Iowa State, Texas, same weekend. So that should be fun. Red Hot Chili Peppers are playing, I think, on Sunday night this year. So I think that is my next travels. Might be out in Denver to visit my sister really quickly. But other than that, I'll be in Omaha, Nebraska. So San Francisco has been great. Super surprised of actually how clean the city was. The last few times I've been here, felt like it was very dirty. I think they did a lot of work during COVID, a lot of new streets, and cleaned the place up. But still definitely has a lot of homelessness and sometimes scary homelessness that we witnessed on the street. But man, what a beautiful city out here. A little different than Makokata, a little
Not
different
quite.
than Ames.
Yeah.
But I think I may have saw Jeff Bezos's a yacht yesterday. I think it was 7 stories. I'll put it up on, I think I may have put up on Twitter. I think it was 7-story yacht. It was floating underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. That was sort of the cool thing that happened yesterday. So got it 25,000 steps in yesterday. Walked around the whole city. Got a workout in. I could use it. So
do you know who is going to have a yacht next? Brett Favre, with all that money from the state of Mississippi.
Stop. We'll see how it comes out. All right, but yeah. I do feel I'm humbled. I feel fortunate, blessed, privileged that I didn't ask the state to take money from federal funds meant for people in poverty in my community.
Sage, there's still time.
I'm lucky enough that didn't happen to me.
All right, buddy. Safe travels back to Omaha. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good.